In the wild, survival is never guaranteed. Every sound matters, every movement matters, and sometimes the difference between life and death comes down to a single moment. One decision, one act of courage, one impossible
Here,
choice.
silence is a warning.
On a quiet
A
morning in
stillness
the
that
African
suggests a
savannah,
predator is near.
a man would come face to face with a wounded lioness trapped in unbearable pain. But what happened after he set her free would leave even experienced rescuers stunned. Because this was not just a rescue story, it was a story of suffering, instinct, motherhood, and a silent bond formed in the space between fear and trust. This is the story of the lioness who led a man to her cubs. Before sunrise, the land was strangely still. The African plains were usually alive, even in darkness. Birds shifted in the acacia trees, insects hummed in the grass. Far away, hyenas called through the night. But on this morning, something felt wrong. The silence was too heavy, too complete. Rahim noticed it the moment he stepped out onto the edge of the savannah. He had lived near this land most of his life. He knew its rhythms. He knew the meaning of distant calls, broken branches, shifting herds, and fresh tracks in the dust. The plains spoke in signs, and this morning they were warning him. The day before, rangers had passed through his village with troubling news. Poachers had been seen near the reserve boundary. They had vanished before they could be stopped, but they had left something behind. Snares. Crude, brutal wire traps designed to tighten the more an animal fought. They did not kill quickly. They trapped, they tore, they waited. Rahim had seen what snares could do. He had seen antelope with wire embedded deep in their necks, foxes with mangled limbs, predators left to die slowly in the heat. So before dawn, with only a wooden staff, a worn canvas bag, and a half-filled water bottle, he set out alone. At first, the savannah looked peaceful. Low mist drifted over the grass. The sky softened from blue-gray into gold. Acacia trees stood dark against the horizon. But as Rahim moved farther from the village, the signs began to appear. Birds shifted suddenly from one patch of brush. A small herd of antelope stood farther away than usual. The air itself seemed tense. Then, in soft earth still holding the memory of recent rain, he found tracks. Lioness tracks, fresh. He crouched immediately, reading the ground with careful eyes. The front prints were strong, steady, but one track dragged slightly, a faint line in the dirt, a sign of injury. Rahim stood and followed. The tracks led through a stretch of tall, dry grass towards a patch of thorn scrub and black rock near a shallow rise. Then he heard it, a low, rough sound, not a roar, not yet, just a strained, painful rumble, the sound of a powerful animal trying to endure what it could not escape. Rahim stopped where he stood. His pulse quickened. He moved more carefully now, one step at a time, parting the grass with his staff. Then he saw vultures perched on a dead tree nearby, waiting. And a few seconds later, he found her. A lioness lay beneath a thorn tree, half hidden in shadow. Her tawny body was tense with pain. Her breathing came too fast, and wrapped tightly around one foreleg was a rusted wire snare anchored to a bent metal stake in the ground. The more she had fought, the tighter it had drawn. The wire had already cut deep into the flesh above her paw. Blood darkened the dust beneath her. Her leg was swollen, hot, and badly infected. The moment she saw Rahim, she lifted her head. Amber eyes locked onto him. Her ears flattened, her lips curled back. A growl rolled from deep inside her chest. Even wounded, she was still a lioness, still dangerous, still powerful, still more than capable of killing a man who came too close. Rahim froze. Every instinct told him to back away. An injured predator was one of the most unpredictable things in nature. Pain turned fear into violence in an instant. But then he looked again at the leg, at the blood, at the raw, deep line where the wire had bitten into living flesh. If he walked away now, she would almost certainly die. Maybe not today, maybe not in the next hour, but slowly, painfully, and alone. Rahim lowered his staff and took one careful step back, giving her space. Then, speaking softly more to steady himself than to calm her, he whispered, "I'm not here to hurt you." The lioness answered with another low growl. Of course she did. To her, she was just another human, and humans were the reason she was suffering. Still, Rahim stayed. He studied the snare from a distance. It was crude but effective, a tightening wire loop fixed to a metal peg driven into the dry earth. The lioness had bent the stake with her strength, but not enough to pull free. Rahim checked what little he had. A short knife, a cloth, half a bottle of water. Not much. He took the water first. Slowly, carefully, he poured some into a small hollow in the dirt just within her reach. Then he backed away. For several seconds she only stared. Then, with great effort, she shifted towards it. Pain flashed across her face as the snare tightened again, but hunger was stronger. She stretched forward and lapped weakly at the small pool. Rahim remained perfectly still. That one moment changed everything. Not because she trusted him, she didn't, but because she chose for just a second not to attack, and that was enough. Rahim began searching the ground nearby for anything useful. He found a thick fallen branch beneath the thorn scrub and tested its strength. Then he moved around to get a better look at the anchor point. The metal peg had been driven close to exposed roots where the soil was cracked and dry. That gave him an idea. If he tried to pull the snare directly, she would panic and tighten it further. But if he loosened the earth around the peg, he might relieve the tension first. So Rahim knelt and began digging with his knife, slowly, carefully. Every few seconds he looked up. The lioness watched every movement. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Her eyes never left him. The sun climbed higher. The cool of dawn began to fade. Flies gathered around the wound. Still he dug. At one point, he used the branch to test the metal peg. The lioness exploded with a warning roar and thrashed once in panic. The wire cut deeper. Fresh blood ran down her leg. Rahim jumped back, breathing hard. One wrong move and he would only make it worse. He waited until she settled again. Then he returned to the soil, scraping away dirt around the root and the bent stake, widening the gap little by little. At last, the peg shifted, just a fraction. Rahim's heart pounded. He wedged the thick branch under the loosened root and pressed down gently. The root lifted. The stake came with it. The tension in the wire eased. The lioness blinked. This was his chance. Rahim gripped the knife tighter and moved closer than he had dared before. The lioness raised her head instantly. A deep growl vibrated through the ground. He stopped. They were now just moments apart. One injured predator, one unarmed man, and a single wire deciding between life and death. Rahim took one breath, then another step. He used the branch to pin the loosened section of snare against the ground so it would not whip back when cut. Then he began sawing at the wire. The first cut barely marked it. The metal was tougher than he expected. He cut again. The lioness snarled and jerked. The wire frayed. He cut harder, and then
It snapped. The broken cable lashed backward into the dirt. The loop fell loose from her leg. For a single suspended second, there was no sound at all. Then the lioness yanked her leg free and lurched backward. Rahim fell into the dust, scrambling away, certain that what came next might kill him. The lioness rose, shaking, bleeding, free. She turned towards him. Her ears flattened, her chest heaved, her injured foreleg hovered just above the ground. Rahim stayed absolutely still. If she charged, he had no chance. The lioness took one step towards him, then another. Then she stopped. She stared. The wind moved through the grass around them. A vulture lifted from the dead tree
and glided into the brightening sky. And then, something extraordinary happened. The lioness turned away, not to leave, but to limp a few paces toward a dense patch of brush beyond the rocks. Then she stopped and looked back at him. Rahim frowned. She looked toward the brush again, then back at him. It was not random. She was waiting. Carefully, slowly, Rahim rose to his feet. The lioness moved ahead a little farther, then stopped again and looked back. It felt impossible. A wounded, wild lioness was not fleeing from him. She was leading him. Rahim followed at a distance, every nerve alive. They crossed a narrow strip of open ground and reached a sheltered patch of dense brush at the base of a low outcrop. The lioness lowered her head toward it. From within the shade came a small, weak sound. A cub. Rahim stepped closer and looked inside. There were 2 lion cubs hidden beneath the branches. Tiny, dust-covered, weak. One could barely lift its head. The other let out a faint cry and collapsed again. Rahim looked back at the lioness. Now he understood. She had endured the snare. She had fought through the pain. She had stayed alive for them. And once she was free, she had not run to save herself. She had led him here, because she could not save them alone. That realization struck with incredible force. Here was one of the wild's fiercest mothers, asking in the only way she could for help. Rahim knelt beside the cubs. He poured the last of the water into his palm and touched it gently to the stronger cub's mouth. It licked weakly. He soaked a strip of cloth and let the smaller cub draw moisture from it. The cubs were alive, barely, but alive enough to save. He looked at the lioness's wounded leg, then back at the cubs. He could not do this alone. He had to get help. So Rahim stood and backed away slowly. The lioness lowered herself beside the cubs, still watching him, still protective. "I'm coming back," he whispered. Then he turned and ran. Rahim sprinted across the savannah toward an old ranger substation near the dry riverbed. By the time he reached it, he was exhausted, breathless, and covered in dust. 2 rangers were inside, a woman named Nadia and a younger ranger named Kareem. The moment Rahim explained what he had seen, the snared lioness, the hidden cubs, the injuries, they moved fast. Medical kits, fluids, a tranquilizer rifle, transport crates. Within minutes, they were racing back through the reserve in a dusty vehicle, Rahim gripping the side rail as the truck bounced over rough ground. When they reached the brush, the lioness was still there, still guarding the cubs, still waiting. Nadia raised the dart rifle. One shot. The dart struck the lioness high in the shoulder. She tried to stand and resist, but pain and exhaustion had already taken too much from her. Within moments, she sank to the earth. Then the rescue began. The cubs were given fluids immediately. The lioness's wound was cleaned and bandaged. Antibiotics were prepared. Her breathing was checked, her temperature monitored, and her body stabilized for transport. Nearby, hidden in the grass, the rangers found not one more snare, but several. A cluster of wire traps waiting silently for any living creature that wandered too close. It was cruelty laid into the land itself. The lioness and cubs were taken to a rehabilitation center deep inside protected reserve territory. There, under the care of wildlife veterinarians, they began the slow process of recovery. The cubs improved first. After fluids and careful feeding, they grew stronger by the day. Their eyes brightened. They began to stand, to call, to move. The lioness healed more slowly. Her wound was deep. Infection had already begun. But the damage had not gone too far. She survived. Each time Rahim returned to visit from behind the safety barriers, she noticed him. She never became tame. She never looked soft. She remained wild in every way that mattered. But there was recognition there, a stillness in her gaze, a memory. When the cubs were finally brought near enough for her to see again, the sound she made was low, deep, and unmistakable. The cubs answered at once. The family had survived. Because one man had stopped. Because one lioness had endured. Because in a moment of desperation, fear had given way to something else. Weeks later, when the veterinarian team was certain they were ready, release day came. Before dawn, the lioness and her cubs were loaded into transport crates and driven to a remote protected basin far from villages and cleared of traps. The cubs were released first. They rushed out into the grass in awkward bursts of energy, blinking at the huge world around them. Then the lioness's crate was opened. For a moment, she remained still inside the shadow of the metal box, reading the air. Then she stepped out. One paw, then the next. No wire, no trap, no blood in the dust. Only open land. The cubs ran to her immediately. She touched them gently, then lifted her head toward the plains. She should have gone then, but before she disappeared into the wild, she turned toward Rahim. Across the release distance, past the vehicles and the waiting rangers, her amber eyes found him one last time. For one quiet moment, neither moved. Then she turned back and walked into the tall golden grass with her cubs close beside her. The three of them disappeared slowly into the rising light of dawn. And just like that, the wild took them back. In the months that followed, anti-poaching patrols swept the area and removed more traps. The reserve tightened its watch. The story spread quietly among villages and ranges alike. Some found it hard to believe that a lioness could be freed by a man, that she could then lead him to her cubs, that such a moment could exist at all between predator and human. But the truth did not need embellishment. A lioness was trapped in a snare. A man had chosen not to walk away. And once she was free, she had shown him what mattered most: her cubs. Because in the wild, survival is not only about strength. Sometimes
it is about endurance. Sometimes it is about trust born from desperation. And sometimes it is about a mother willing to suffer anything to keep her young alive. Somewhere out there, beneath the same African sun, that lioness still walks free. And because of one impossible morning,